We're here at the launch of a wonderful book, Downhill from Here, running from John O'Groats to Land's End. And Gavin is a wonderful writer. It's a fantastic book. He is a man of many parts. He is a screenwriter, he's a director whose first feature, Sparks and Embers, came out fairly recently. He's a runner, somebody who's become an athlete really in later life, and somebody who will do almost anything, it seems. He is somebody, I often feel that while other people only think of doing things, Gavin actually does them. He is also the nearest thing I have to a brother, and I couldn't be prouder of him if he were indeed my brother, for having run almost 1,200 miles and run a marathon pretty much every day for over 6 weeks. I should, however, say that in early life, Gavin was more famous for his serial scrapes and comic calamities than for anything else. He was, in many ways, the Harold Lloyd of Edinburgh. He was that person who is most likely to ring me saying, "I'm hanging off the hour hand of Big Ben and it's 10 to midnight, can you help?" He is the only person I have ever met who has, for example, eaten a daffodil to impress a girl at the time. He is the only person I have ever met who has actually licked the button on a pedestrian crossing, on that occasion to demonstrate our resilience against germs. No ill effects. He is the only person I have ever met who has locked 3 people into a rental apartment in San Francisco while getting on a plane to Los Angeles. I was one of the people concerned. He's also the only person who, when gifted a hand-painted plate for Christmas, I believe, put it on the roof of his car, got into the driver's seat and drove away. However, the plate was actually intact on arrival. It was a frosty day, and I think it froze to the roof of the car. It was actually perfectly safe when he got to his destination. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is really Gavin's true secret. That somehow he succeeds in being both the piece of buttered toast that lands buttered side down and the cat that always lands on its feet. That things go wrong, but they always get better. And so when he told me that he was planning to run from John O'Groats to Land's End, I wasn't entirely surprised that he would do something with such audacity, requiring such resilience. I also wasn't entirely surprised when things went wrong along the way and he lost some very expensive equipment and had to swim a highland river. But I also wasn't at all surprised when he succeeded, because his resilience and his fortitude are something quite extraordinary. He has grit. And his book, as I hope you will agree when you've read it yourself, I know some of you already have, is full of his trademark ruthless honesty, but also of fun and humour and determination and random thoughts of all kinds, about everything from wind turbines to planning laws. It is just full of interest on every page. So the running order for this evening is that Gavin is going to read from his book 2 extracts, which will last about 15 minutes, which will take you hopefully into the world of his run. And then we're going to screen a short extract of things going wrong in a Gavin-esque way, of the film that he made as he was running along. And then we're going to have a Q&A. I'll kick things off, and then we'll open things to the floor so you can ask Gavin yourself anything you like about long distance running or anything else. So without further ado, Gavin Boyter.
Thank you. And thanks, Sarah, for that very generous and interesting introduction. I've forgotten a few of those things, but probably just as well. Anyway, I'm going to read a couple of pieces from the book, contrasting pieces. The first is set during my time running the Pennine Way, and it's about extreme weather and, to a certain extent, endurance. So let's begin. Greying clouds soon began to hurl down icy rain as the path levelled off into a rough grouse moor. The area was also evidently used for military training. I passed a personnel carrier parked in the middle of the stony pathway, a line of camouflaged and waterproofed men standing sentry amongst the heather, looking miserable and immovable at the same time. Perhaps it was some kind of endurance training. Certainly the brutal wind and slanting Arctic rain seemed designed to break the spirit. For the first time in the long run, I began to feel underdressed. I was wearing my running gloves as ever, and a cap, but was still clad in technical t-shirt, thin windproof jacket and shorts. This outfit offered no protection against the driving near horizontal precipitation. As moorland gave way to barry rocky wilderness, the right side of my face began to go numb. I had to hold a plastic sheathed map against my cheek to protect it from what felt like stabbing needles of rain. Fortunately, I didn't need the map much for navigation, as the path looked like it had been carved out of the landscape with jackhammers and giant chisels as it arced up the side of Cross Fell, the highest point in all the Pennines, at 893 metres, which is just 70 feet short of being a Munro. My feet were soaked after one too many encounters with puddles. I was just too tired to run around, and I began to search through the mist and rain for sight of a bothy I'd identified on the map that morning. Bothies are communal hikers' huts distributed amongst the mountains and available to all travellers who obey the common sense rules of well-behaved wayfarers. Usually furnished with little more than basic rooms, coal or wood-fired stoves and sleeping platforms, these huts are nevertheless a welcome respite for tired or soaked hikers. Many travellers on multi-day journeys choose to spend the night there rather than fight with tents in gale conditions. My frozen 8-mile dash to the Crossfell hut felt like a race for survival. I knew I couldn't spend much time there and would be unlikely to find the means to make a fire to get dry, nor did I have a change of running gear with me, but stepping out of the brutal weather for a few minutes would prove very welcome. Situated about 100 feet shy of the summit of Crossfell, the hut had a little entrance hall, one room containing a few chairs, a notice board, visitor's book, and a second room with a coal or wood-burning stove and sleeping platform. Without matches or fuel, I couldn't light a fire, but I did find a smelly old blanket, which I wasn't too proud to wrap around myself as I explored. The notice board contained evidence of fellow ultra-runners Dave and Stevens passing in the form of their laminated fundraising card. I was glad that they, too, had felt the need to seek shelter despite their heroism. I signed the visitor's book and filmed close-ups of discarded and ancient paperbacks, stubs of candles and squeezed-out toothpaste tubes. The hut was a pleasing reminder that I wasn't the only nutcase to wander this barren, rocky mountainside. However, I couldn't stay there too long. As I squinted through the tiny windows, I could see that the rain had abated a little, although the hardy fir trees someone had planted near the hut, in a futile attempt at additional shelter, were waving around like the arms of drowning men. The thick stone walls were almost completely soundproof. Only a thin wail across the chimney betrayed the presence of the Helm wind, a weather phenomenon remarkable enough to possess its own Wikipedia entry. Apparently, it is the only named wind in the British Isles, forming under the cap of cloud that almost permanently wreaths the top of the fell. Still sodden after eating some energy bars and folding the blanket back where I found it, I headed back out to face down the full force of the Helm. It's such a vivid memory I can still recall it with remarkable clarity. I seemed to have to lean into the wind to maintain my balance as I marched up the last 100 feet towards the top of the fell. Running here was out of the question. Wet slabs and shattered fragments of rock dominated the landscape, across which damp billows of cloud drifted. Remarkably, just as I was beginning to think I was probably walking to my doom, a figure swathed in a blue anorak and waterproof trousers marched cheerfully past me, alone but unperturbed. I exchanged a wave with this solitary walker, as our voices couldn't carry past the end of our noses. The wind was finding notches and holes in the rocks and singing with a peculiar rising and falling howl. All pretense that a marked-out path fell apart in the rounded dome of shale, gritstone and limestone pieces that littered the thin grass. Despite the lack of a path, someone had engineered a huge 4-armed slate shelter laid out in a cross, giving me a chance to crouch down and consult the map and search for a blue dot on my phone. The attempt was futile. As thick blankets of cloud made their way across the hilltop, thinning very occasionally to afford a rare glimpse of terrain, I couldn't reconcile the landscape with either of my maps. I had to navigate by intuition. I dragged my way through the mist over a rocky plain like the surface of an alien world and jumped into a trench of rock like a soldier under heavy fire. The rain had all but stopped at least, although the clouds provided plenty of moisture and the wind wouldn't let up its banshee wail. After a few minutes of sheltering and poking my camera, periscope-like, up to film the chaos around me, a gap in the clouds formed for long enough for me to glimpse a route towards the next fell. I identified a steep descent to the grassy plain that gradually rose to a hilltop, upon which stood a radar station like something from a 1960s sci-fi movie, complete with golf ball-like geodesic dome and mushroom-shaped antenna. On the way there, I passed a few more heroic hikers, including one American woman who seemed intent on photographing two bearded strangers who were sheltering and smoking amongst the piled stone. Although their photographer waved cheerily, her subjects, who themselves looked chiselled from rock, wore expressions too stern and steadfast to challenge with more than a terse "Hi." I turned and started picking my way down out of the tumult of cloud. Down in the saddle of moorland between Cross Fell and Great Dun Fell, it felt like an entirely different climate, considerably warmer, still windy but not violently so. A line of flagstones led me across the heather and up towards the strange white structures comprising the radar station, which in their retro-futuristic stylings resembled a Space 1999 set. This station, which actually dates from the 1980s, is part of Britain's air traffic control system. The geodesic dome, or radome, contains a revolving microwave antenna. Leading up to it is the UK's highest road, a service route leading from the nearby village of Knock. After descending from the fell, I ran down this strip of near pristine tarmac for about a mile, then followed signage across peaty boggy moorland. The sun broke through patchy clouds and glinted on large pools of standing water like fragments of discarded mirror as I made good time down towards the village of Dufton. The trail grew steeper and rockier, but I relished the challenge to stretch out and run. Fast, but as controlled, I flattered myself, as a proper fell runner. Sheep scattered from my footfalls as I navigated by stone markers inscribed with gold-painted arrows. I think I'd pushed the potential dangers of Cross Fell to the compartment of my mind where the horrors of the 5th of September still lurked. Now I relished the sheer contrast between being frozen, disorientated and wet, and this feeling of gravity-assisted flight. I bounded over rocks and squeezed my feet into thin sheet trails, descending the 600 metres to the town, with a serious lunch craving driving me on. So that's the first piece. In contrast, the second piece is me running into a town, Exeter, from rather more gentle English countryside. Two fleeting memories of running from childhood. The first was an unusual PE, physical education session, in which we were taken out on a cross-country run, the one and only time this occurred. I must have been 12 or 13 years old, and I still have a powerful memory of this experience because, unusually for PE, I both enjoyed it and was good at it. I've never been much into team sports as either a participant or spectator. This was different. All I was being asked to do was run, and that seemed both easy and fairly pleasurable. It was a crisp autumn day in Edinburgh, and our route took us through various playing fields in Oxgangs before looping back into Firhill High School's grounds. I didn't really understand why many of the other kids seemed to think this was a form of punishment or torture, why so many of them bunked off to smoke cigarettes behind bushes rather than participate. At that time, the school didn't have a particularly stellar academic or sporting record, and even though I came second in this non-race, I don't remember ever receiving any encouragement to take up running competitively. This is especially puzzling as I was showing little or no aptitude for any other sport. That said, my second memory is of somehow being asked to participate in an interscholastic games event, which remarkably was taking place at Murrayfield Stadium, Edinburgh's most prestigious athletics venue. I wonder now if the school's participation was sprung upon them at the last minute, since I can remember no selection process nor any training whatsoever. But nevertheless, I was being asked to run third position in a 400-metre relay race. I remember a stadium full of spectators and dozens of school teams taking part. I can't remember much about this race itself, except I think I fumbled the baton and ran as fast as my legs would carry me. Despite my best efforts, I dropped a place. I think we finished halfway down the field in that event. Nothing much remains sharp in memory bar the actual feeling of running along the gently curving track between those white lines. The relay race was also to prove a one-off. I think I received a certificate of some sort. Perhaps Mum has it in the bottom of a cupboard somewhere. I'm mentioning these two experiential fragments to illustrate that my upbringing was as unsporty and non-competitive as it's possible to be, despite the fact that there was at least one activity I might have excelled at. Such regrets are pointless. At best, I might have managed a sub-3 marathon if I'd started in my youth. Perhaps a 15 to 16 minute 5k would have been possible. I doubt I would have troubled any leaderboards. Two of the great things about running is the accessibility of the sport and the fact you need not compete against anybody but yourself if you so choose. The latter factor makes it appeal to me more than any one-on-one or team sport ever could. The pressure of contributing to a team performance caused me absurd levels of stress. Even the pressure of competing against myself and my expectations reduces me to a quivering jelly before the start gun goes off at any marathon. The long run was different. Given its extraordinary duration, 6 weeks of running, and the fact that nobody else was doing it with me, and very few people have ever attempted it, there was no possibility for stomach-churning worry or competitive stress to develop. Instead, the only negative emotions I ever felt were the occasional trough of self-doubt, and perhaps a creeping disappointment that I wasn't quite the 40 miles a day super athlete that, for some unknown reason, I thought I could be. That said, after 5 consecutive days of 30 plus miles, on the brilliantly sunny, crystal clear morning of the 12th of October 2015, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I had 5 or 6 days left as I skimmed alongside the manicured hedges of Devon, heading towards Exeter and Dartmoor. It was perfect running weather, my legs were magically renewed somehow, and all was right with the world. 40 minutes into the day's running, I'd already managed to take the wrong turning. But the complex web of small roads between Fenny Bridges, Tallaton and Wimpole meant I could just alter course a little and I'd find my way back to the desired route without too much difficulty. Most of my small roads skirted the aforementioned villages rather than passing through them, but I would briefly visit the town of Broadclyst, also known by the rather odd name of Dog Village, which turned out to be a rather pretty parish once put to flame by invading Danes in 1001 AD. Its canine nomenclature refers to a village square where the Black Dog pub once stood, now converted to housing. The English do love their pubs. Exeter lay 5 miles to the west as I walked and jogged up a steep, leafy lane, pursued timidly by 2 sheepdogs, whose unseen owner was presumably around the corner. I hoped they weren't strays, and, in any case, I had no food to offer them. Perhaps they were just on a pilgrimage to Dog Village. The roads were utterly quiet, brilliantly sunlit, and heavily wooded, all of which suited me just fine. Getting closer to the city, I passed more and more cyclists, hikers, and even 1 or 2 runners. Seeing others exercising in the fresh air helped me feel a sense of connection, a kinship I'd not felt since the Pennine Way's busier stretches. Running for 40-odd days straight by oneself can be lonely at times. We may be our own best reserves, but those reserves aren't boundless. I was missing the pub conversations, nights out, and even the interactions I'd had in the office before giving up my job to pursue this craziness. The task ahead seemed eminently achievable. Get into Dartmoor by the end of the day, cross the wild moors by the end of the 13th, hit the coast by the end of the 14th or 15th, and then run along the shoreline to the end of Britain. Meanwhile, I found myself passing an endless array of almost painfully cute thatched and whitewashed stone cottages, brightly berried hawthorn hedges, burgeoning apple trees, and leaf canopies full of birdsong. The climate this far south felt markedly different from anywhere else I'd been, milder, less capable of threatening and sudden shifts. Was it really going to be this easy for the remainder of my running challenge? This late in autumn, the sides of the road were deep with sun-crisped leaves, the piece punctuated by the plop of falling acorns and the whirring of sycamore seeds as they spiraled to the ground. A light breeze rustled on the hedges on the higher roads. My optimism began to fight the erosion of a growing fatigue and the nagging calf pain that had returned after 8 miles. I find myself oscillating between hopefulness and a kind of despairing awareness of every dragging footstep. Leaden legs and deep fatigue are habitually my worst enemies. Jolts of pain can perversely spur me on. I'd fight their occasional interruptions. All-pervasive exhaustion that builds and builds proved a more formidable foe. When I hit the main road into Exeter, gratefully hopping onto its pavement, it couldn't have come a moment too soon. My animal self was nagging me to stop now with every step, refusing to submit to my will. I had to trick it by promising it an excellent meal. Surely a city the size of Exeter, with its huge student population, would offer every kind of food available to mankind. Let me run there, I promised, and I will sate your desires. As outskirts gave way to suburbs, and then to the city centre, my willpower reasserted itself, and I raced past student pubs, red brick office buildings, and public parks. There's a shot I'm particularly proud of in the film, heading through the shopping precincts of Exeter city centre. In my delirious hunger, I'm running purely on autopilot, and I've thrown shyness and caution to the winds, and I'm actually running down the middle of the main street, weaving in and out of students and office workers making their way to lunch, and shoppers on the prowl for a bargain. Magically, everyone just seems to avoid me at the last possible moment, and without irritation. I glide through them like an unseen spirit. Somehow there is busy foot traffic, but very few vehicles. I feel secure in stepping off the pavement into the main thoroughfare when I need to. The soundtrack to the shop mingles music, fragments of conversation, the engines of hybrid buses, and the clatter of distant building work. I'd not seen so many people in one place since leaving Edinburgh. I felt oddly superhuman. Nobody but me was deranged enough to jog down the main shopping streets. My pre-lunch mission was to locate Exeter Cathedral and stop there. It would be an easy rendezvous point for Sorrel. At first, I took a back alley and got a little lost. After a bit of investigation, I located the lane leading to the front of the cathedral and ran out into the large public square. Dozens of people were picnicking on the lawns in front of the 12th century cathedral, whose impressive west front dominated the square. A ring of cafes and shops circled the space, in which workers rested and ate, or in the case of one group of teenagers, played table tennis. I flopped to the grass, at long last able to stretch out, and made the necessary phone call.